Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting important events, key issues, and interesting people. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. You hear stories of doctors, teachers, nurses, and engineers going to other countries where their expertise is badly needed. But how about going to a place where there is fighting and war? Well, we are visiting with two people who have just returned from Syria-Jordan border, and they are here to tell us about that experience. Let's meet Dr. Abdul Kawamleh, who is a cardiac physician, and his daughter, Suzanne, who has a couple of different roles. So first of all, Suzanne, you're a student at?
Valparaiso University.
And you were like almost done?
Almost, senior year. I still have some summer classes, but I know.
But so close.
So close.
All right. But you also are involved in this organization that your dad is part of. You kind of have this job of being, what, the secretary?
Yeah, I get to be the secretary. I was the board member the first few years, and I take on a variety of roles simply because of the nature of the organization and the fact that it's small. So.
Okay, and we'll get back to this organization, what it is, but I think anybody who's watching this show is going to go, okay, why would anybody go to a place where there's fighting and people being hurt and all these kind of things? Why are you going over to the border of Syria and Jordan? Why are you going over there during this conflict?
First, Keith, let me thank you for giving us the opportunity to shed some lights on the Syrian people suffering. In fact, in the last 3 years, they endured a lot of suffering from elderly children on all aspects of life. And I feel it's a duty on my side and on everybody's side. When you look at the human face of the people suffering, you want to be part of that factor that can alleviate their suffering. You want to be with them during these difficult times. You want to help them whatever you can. I think it's rewarding too, to be with them and to see some of the work you do, results of the work you do.
So you were born in Syria?
I was born in Syria.
Okay, so when did you come to the U.S. then?
I was born in Syria. Actually, I finished my medical school from Aleppo University in '87, and I came into U.S. 1990.
Okay.
Where I finished my higher education in medicine and cardiovascular disease at Tulane University.
Okay, so you still have family over there?
I still have brothers, sisters there. In fact, one of my sisters, one of the internally displaced people in Syria, millions. And I could not get in touch with her for the past almost a year. I don't know where she ended up with her family.
So do you know now?
No.
You still do know where?
Even after the visit to Jordan, I tried all I can. I could not get a hold of her.
That's got to be very scary. Now, that's your aunt?
My aunt, yeah.
Okay. So part of the answer to this question, obviously, is this is your homeland. You still have family there and people, but you still choose to go over there. Now, on this last trip, and how recent was this trip, Suzanne?
Just 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
So you went on the trip, and your brother?
Yes.
Okay, this is like a family thing.
We had some other members as well with us.
The other two board members joined us from the organization.
Okay, so, and how long were you there?
10 days.
Okay. Could you tell us a little about what you were doing when you got there?
Actually, this is the year 14, and this is the third year our organization operating there. And we like to expand our scope of work, whether it's on the healthcare field or humanitarian. We like to expand our support to different states in Syria or provinces. So one of the main reasons there to meet the activists, some of them came from Syria to the border area, to meet with them face to face, to have a personal relationship with them, to meet with the representative of the local coordinations there inside Syria. So we're building a team on the border in Jordan and in Syria to facilitate our work there. Also, we met with the humanitarian relief organization so we can cooperate with them on the issue in Syria.
Now, are you mostly working with the refugees that are coming out of Syria?
No, actually, our main part of work, see, when it begins the revolution about 3 years ago, we visited the Zaatari camp. That was the first visit. And it was a disaster there. So we focused there, and we provided with food baskets and aid. But now, if you go and visit the camp, it's a little better than. So now we focus inside Syria, where a lot of people deprived from main basic life necessities like healthcare, food, shelter, and clothes.
So this is a camp inside Syria.
The Zaatari camp is in Jordan,
Okay.
even though there are smaller camps inside Syria on the border.
Okay, and most of the people in the camp are Syrians.
Are Syrians.
Then, okay. What's the camp like, Suzanne? You've been there twice now?
Is this our third trip?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
The camps inside Syria or the camps like the Zaatari camp? The Zaatari camp is the largest camp in Jordan, which is completely Syrians. And it's gotten a little bit better. I mean, the first year we went, there was a horrible winter storm. Literally, the tents were blue plastic, and they had collapsed, and the area had flooded, and it was already a bad state, so this had just made it worse.
So help we Americans understand, what's a winter storm like in Jordan?
It was actually very strange. You wouldn't expect a winter storm, so it was just flooding.
Okay,
Rain
so
and
this is
flooding.
rain.
Yeah.
No snow.
No.
Okay. I mean, after everybody's been having our
That's
winter
true.
here, they're thinking, oh, a winter storm, they must have
Yeah.
had snow, but there's no snow over there.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind
But
of
it is cold.
How big is this camp? How many people
I think
living
it's
in
the
this
fourth
camp?
largest city in Jordan now.
The camp is almost
Itself.
has become a
Yeah.
city.
150,000 in the camp now,
It's
150,000 people.
refugees.
Wow. So what's it kind of like in the camp from either one of you? When you walk in, what do you see?
We saw when we first walked in huge puddles, like pools of water. We saw people trying to put mattresses. So aid agencies would bring in like very thin mattresses, spongy mattresses that they would sleep on. They were trying to make a shelter out of those. So they would bring any materials they had whatsoever, any piece of plastic, anything that had broken off during the storm, and just trying to piece it together with whatever tools they had to make some sort of a shelter.
So what's the sanitation and if there's pools of water and there's a
Non-existent.
running water?
Actually, the sanitation is terrible there because we spend more than one day. Actually, we visit almost like every day we visit the camp during there, almost 5 visits. It's very terrible. They live in a tent. If you want to talk really bathrooms, there are no doors for the bathroom, no water. A woman has to walk in the middle of the night, a little short distance to go use the bathroom, no electricity, power. It's freezing inside the tents when we went there, children shivering, not enough food, all kind of really bad things there.
Now, part of what, in reading about your organization, you are trying to provide humanitarian aid, food, and these kind of things. You're also trying to work with some of the orphans, and I think you're trying to do some medical kinds of things, some healthcare things. So what are you guys doing with are there a lot of orphans from this, Suzanne?
The orphan population has skyrocketed just by the nature of the conflict itself. And you'll see a lot of them, for example, will come by ambulance who will be wounded to Jordan to seek medical care. And they'll be
children
by
are wounded?
Children, yeah. And they'll be by themselves. We saw 2 patients who were amputees. They had their legs, and one of them was in a chair and his brother was with him. And you ask them, where are your parents? And they'll just tell you, our father is in heaven, he passed away, and their mother isn't there, they don't know. They're by themselves completely. And that just struck me as so bizarre.
So what do you say? So what do you say to a little kid who just shared that with you?
I had no idea what to say. Because I wasn't expecting that. I mean, despite the fact that I'm Syrian and I know the situation, I wasn't expecting him to tell me that his parents were in heaven. And just so simply, so directly.
So what kind of experience are you having with, what has kind of surprised you or shocked you being there?
Mainly the children. Mainly the results of the poor healthcare in Syria and the poor equipment they use, the doctors there. I've seen a lot of children, they lost their limbs because really there's no vascular surgeon inside Syria to help repair their vascular injuries or to save their legs or their arms. That's what struck me the most. And that's what we're trying as an organization to provide those physicians with some means, with an orthopedic surgical equipment, with ventilators, with all these things that can make some difference in the people's lives.
Well, before the revolution started, I assume that there was fairly decent health care in Syria, a fairly decent infrastructure of hospitals and doctors, yes or no?
Yes and no, and the reason because there are more than one level in the healthcare in Syria. You can go to very private hospital, but this is for the well-to-do people, for the rich people, and you can get great health care there. But if you're really poor and below average, you can go to one of those hospitals, really, which is you don't get the health care you really wanted. You might get sicker than when you got into the hospital. So it's really, if you're poor, you paid the price before and you're paying the price now.
So once the war started, the internal war, then I assume that access to any sort of health care even diminished further. It's even worse for the people who are poor.
Tragically, Keith, the government targeted the healthcare workers and the healthcare personnel. They targeted physicians, EMT personnel, nurses. They killed a lot of them, detained a lot of them. Personally, one of my friends was my classmate for 6 years during the university years. They dragged him from his bed 5 in the morning and they killed him cold-blooded. All he does, try to help the people in the makeshift hospital. So that's why you see 15,000 physicians, they left Syria. 15,000 left fear for their lives. Like 75% of the hospital non-functioning, destroyed. There's no medicine. They really operate in a small basements with very, very basic medical equipment.
So you are working with, and I'll ask Suzanne, since you're like the corporate side of this thing, right? So there's a bunch of, how many other people are like your dad involved in this?
In the organization or in this
in the organization?
Situation? About 12, 13.
Okay, so there's about 12 or 13 physicians. Are they all physicians?
No.
7 of them are physicians and the rest are professionals.
Okay, so of those physicians, is everybody Syrian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what is your role with this group? I mean,
so when we started off in the beginning, it was just a small group of us, maybe 3 or 4, and that's when we started deliberating. Something needs to be done. I mean, we can't do something on an individual basis that's sufficient, so we had to organize. We saw across the United States who would be interested in joining in something that's just completely nonprofit, non-political, non-religious, that's able to treat people who are just caught in between. That was our focus. And in doing so, I learned a lot of like the IRS guidelines and filing and paperwork, and so that took on my role as secretary. But even in our trips, oftentimes, if I'm the only female, I have access to certain areas that maybe the other physicians who are with us don't, just due to privacy or due to cultural reasons. So I'd be able to go inside further into the home and talk, because they're usually split. So they'd be able to meet with the men, but the women and children would be inside. So I would be permitted to go in and I'd have access, and they would tell me what's going on and what are the situations and what are the children suffering from, and if there's any type of injuries or something. Like when I was volunteering in the hospital, they would set me aside specifically to go to change the bandages of the females who were wounded, because they'd prefer to have a woman.
are you the only woman involved with this group of 14?
No, actually our vice president is a female.
Okay, so how many women are involved with this?
2.
2.
2, okay,
Yeah.
so you're one of 2.
Yeah.
So, going back to maybe how this was put together, it sounds like you were in this from the very beginning. You were one of the first doctors to be involved. Now, we kind of got reacquainted here today because I met you several years ago, and I know you're quite the go-getter. So, how involved have you been from the beginning? Was this kind of a passion for your father, and you like kind of jumped in, or has he kind of jumped into this thing and you've kind of followed along a little bit?
In the beginning, well, my brother's the one who was really, he would be like, oh, the revolution's going to begin, because the Arab Spring happened, but honestly, all of us were cynical. We were like, there's no way it's going to happen in Syria at all, whatsoever. But when it broke out and it happened, I remember, and I don't even remember what was going on with my family, honestly. Like, we just completely, we took over. We were focused so much on getting the news out, because we were worried about the fact that there weren't media personnel inside Syria to at least cover what was happening. Now there are. Now you see journalists everywhere. But in the very first few days when it happened in Daraa, when it started, and there were massacres and there were huge protests, hundreds of thousands of people, we wanted to be able to, we were translating videos, for example, subtitling videos, contacting media agencies, trying to put people who spoke English, who are eyewitnesses, in contact with media personnel, and that was originally how we got involved. And that was just our thing, sort of, as just me and my brother. And I remember, because I basically just didn't go to school second semester, I'm surprised how I managed to get through and pass and everything, but it was
So when we see the president of Valparaiso University, we should remind him that you weren't around much during that time?
Yeah, first semester.
So this is obviously of great interest to you, but this is your immediate family back there. And I've heard these same kind of stories from people who are Egyptian and some of these other countries who've had these kind of problems. I mean, How do you cope with the fact that you don't know where your sister is and what's going on with your family? How do you cope with that?
Actually, this is my coping mechanism, trying to help people. Trying to help. Before this is started, I used to go on vacation. I spend a few weeks there once a year. I see my family there, and because there's no healthcare system or insurance there, I used to take some medicine with me and treat people and try to help. But after all this started, it becomes overwhelming. And then we thought, really, we need some organized effort here to help. But it's really being with the children. Suzanne mentioned talking to the children who lost his family, to be with him, to help him wherever we can, to visit the families who has no food to eat for the morning or for the dinner. That's my coping mechanism, is really to be part of it and help the needy people.
So that's kind of the going. I mean, it's still got to be tough being here waiting for the next trip. When's the next time you're going to go?
Actually, let me tell you a personal story that was a second trip. We went to the Zatari camp, Suzanne and my other son with me, and we have another couple of friends. And we're surveying the camp and delivering some food baskets and helping. And all of a sudden, guess who I saw? My sister and her family. Wow. Out of the blue, I saw her there. That was really a moment.
I still have it on camera. It was just...
Suzanne got it in the camera. So I saw my niece too. I saw my friends, my neighbors, my people who really used to live a good life, decent life. I saw them just living in tents and they have nothing. They left everything behind them. So it was tragic.
So how do you feel when you come back to Northwest Indiana, back to Valparaiso, and you know you're back in your pretty nice home driving your car and they're still over there?
That's the hardest thing.
Guilty.
Yeah.
You want to be there with them. You want to be there and help them. You want to share some of their suffering. You want to sit on the ground with them. You want to touch the orphans' heads, and you want to be there. You feel you're abandoning them, but on the other hand, you're doing something to help them.
Is it hard? Obviously, you shared it was hard to stay focused on school. Is it hard to stay focused on work?
No, I balance my work and my humanitarian work. I still take care of my patient to the best, and I love my patient and my practice. And at the same time, I do my share to help the people.
Does it feel like the people over here even understand what's going on there at all to you? Or are people interested? Or how have they kind of reacted to your interest in this?
I think there's more, we tend to a lot of times think, nobody really cares about what's happening in Syria. But I remember even before my trips, and they'd be very short notice, I'd have kids from my class who, honestly, maybe they couldn't even point out Syria on a map at this point, but they would tell me, I have $45 that I could donate for a space heater that you can give to anybody who's in the refugee camp. And they're college students, and you do sense empathy. People do want to help, and they do want to know what's going on. And that's one aspect where I am so grateful for, because it's surprising. You wouldn't expect it. Honestly, if this was happening in a different country, I don't know if I would personally be as invested or if I would reach out and try to find a way to help. But there's other aspects where there's just no way for somebody to understand, because like the instance, like running into your aunt in a refugee camp where you're trying to document how awful it is, and then finding out that they live there and that she has problems breathing because of how awful the sanitary conditions. That's not something that's easy for anybody to relate to. But
as you were telling that story, I just had this thought that flashed through my mind. We run this youth leadership program here in Northwest Indiana through the South Shore Leadership Center. And I remember interviewing one of the kids who we asked him what was important to him, and he talked about the refugees in the camps in Syria. And I remember he was a kid from Valpo, from Valpo High School. And I'm thinking, that's really interesting, because how that has floated from probably what you're doing out among the other young people who hear these stories. So it does make a difference. Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel to know that it's happening?
I went to get lunch once at Noodles and Company, and the cashier had a free Syria bracelet, and I was just like, I was like, maybe it's not really a free Syria bracelet, maybe it's just another green bracelet. And I asked him, and he's like, yeah, it is. One of my friends is Syrian, etc. And I'm like, this is so cool. I'm at Noodles and Company in Valparaiso, and you know about Syria, and you're supporting it, and you bought the bracelet because it was for a fundraising effort. And things like that, it inspires you.
Wow. What do you wish people here knew more about what was going on there?
The human face of the crisis. I want them to know the suffering of the people, suffering of the children, suffering of the physicians there who try to do their job without any bias. I want to bring it to the surface. I don't want it to be the forgotten story. I know there are too many things in the world, too many things on our mind, but this is really a crisis that 300,000 people killed so far, millions being refugees in the neighboring countries, like 3 million children they deprived from school. That's what I want the people to know about this crisis and about the suffering.
Is there something that people here can do besides knowing about it? I mean, what can people here do?
Of course, they can help all the humanitarian, a lot of humanitarian organizations do a great job around in Syria and the neighboring countries in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, and inside Syria. They can help them financially. If they can help financially, they can maybe talk to a congressman or senator and bring the subject to them that there is a humanitarian catastrophe here. We have to pay attention to it. And if you can't do any of that, pray for the Syrian people that they be safe.
That's really great advice, and I'm sure all the visitors, or all of our viewers heard that. I really appreciate both of you coming here and spending time with us, and I appreciate you being so open about what's going on, and I deeply appreciate what you're doing to help other people in other parts of the world. So thanks for being here.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
I have a suggestion for your next vacation. Pack your bag, reserve your flight, and head to a place where hardly anyone speaks English and you don't know the language. How about booking a room with no air conditioning in a climate where it's humid and in the 90s every day? Surround yourself with people living in abject poverty and minimal sanitation. Let's add to the itinerary heavily armed soldiers patrolling, a few gunshots or explosions, and a street full of angry protesters. I am ready to go. How about you? Most of us would not intentionally choose a getaway with those types of conditions, but there are those who do. Not only do they spend a week or more of their personal time in these circumstances, they pay for a plane ticket that is several $1,000s, often leave their personal belongings behind and donate money to some local group. What is wrong with these people? Absolutely nothing. In fact, there is something very right about them. They are sacrificing to make the world a better place. Not only with their time, but many forego a paycheck while they are away. The reasons why vary and may be complex or just simple. You heard about some of that motivation on today's show. I know a lot of people who have engaged in these adventures. Some have done it for a year or more. The stories usually include some level of hardship, challenges, and discomfort. Also, they are filled with moments of laughter, warmth, and fulfillment. I've spent some time teaching in other countries, and I usually go by myself. It can get a little lonely. It's tough wandering around in a place where you seldom see a sign in English and can't decipher the writing. You don't hear a single word you understand, but eventually can figure out a few things. You have to rely on different ways to communicate, and you must work to comprehend the culture. Yet so many of the people you meet are kind, friendly, and eager to help. In the end, you gain so much and learn about yourself and others. It is so worthwhile. So give it a little thought when you are looking at those pictures of beautiful hotels and fabulous destinations with exquisite food and tours of incredible sights. Maybe it's time for you to take on a challenge. Use your talent in a different way. Sacrifice some of your hours and invest part of you in a new way. No matter what motivates you to go, you will come back a different person, and the world will be better for it. We really appreciate you watching our show. If you missed part of it or know someone who would like to see it, you can watch from our website. Click on the television tab, scroll down to Lakeshore Focus, and select one of our past shows. Our website and email address are listed on your screen, and you know your thoughts are always welcome. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.